fairness of how that transition to net zero is delivered across the UK. Community Energy England, in partnership with some other organisations, did a vision document for the community energy sector a few years ago, and with the right support, community energy by 2030 could deliver 87,000 jobs, save 2.5 million tonnes of CO2 emissions, and add over £1.8 billion of money to the UK economy. So it's got the potential to make some very good numerical contributions towards the targets that we're all trying to reach, but also I think it plays an important role in like I said, the fairness or a just transition, if we were to use policy speak, because the Citizens Advice Bureau produced a report last autumn that said without people's buy-in, we don't stand a chance of getting to those net zero targets, because you won't bring people along with you, and more than that, they'll get in the way if they think things are being done to them and not done with them. So that's where I think the real value of community energy is. So to achieve that, we need to grow and scale. So what we've got this morning is an excellent panel of speakers who will introduce themselves in a minute, if that's okay, and then I've got a series of questions to put to them, but this is an interactive session, so I'd like to take questions from the audience. We can do that at the end, but if anyone's got any sort of pertinent points to contribute as we go along, please feel free to put your hand up. If we get this going as a bit of a discussion, I think that would be a real success. As Philip said, Community Energy England's really keen to get your feedback from these sessions to help us as an organisation guide what we're trying to do and support the sector to achieve its ambitions. So, without further ado, I will just go for introductions, and who's going first? I think you're getting the microphone first, Dave. So we've got Dave Mason from Dane Valley Community Energy. Do you want to say a little bit about your organisation and where you're based?
Yes, our first project was completed in 2021, which was a 65 kilowatt hydroelectric plant on the River Dane in Congleton. And that project's gone tremendously well. So in the 3 years it's been running, that plant's generated around about 900 megawatt hours of green energy. And we've contributed something like £15,000 to local charities from surplus income. I think it's been helped by the very wet weather we've been having. It's been running day and night virtually since it was built. On the back of that success, we started a new project. I should say the first project the development was funded by the Community Energy Fund, or its forerunner, which was the Rural Community Energy Fund. And the second project has also been funded, the development of that's been funded through the CDF. And that comprises two parts: a second 55 kilowatt hydroelectric plant further down the Dane in Congleton Park. That's been a bit mired in bureaucracy. We've been trying to acquire a piece of scrubland from the local authority for 2 years now, and that's been a big delay on getting that plant up and running. And then the second part of the project, which is making much better progress, is 450 kilowatts of solar PV, which we're going to fit to the roofs of 9 schools and 1 golf club. So that's, as I said, made good progress. We're hoping to do the golf club, do the installation work in the next few weeks. We completed a fundraising through a community share offer at the end of December, and we raised just short of £500,000 from that offer. And that's going to pay for the solar installations for the panel and the installation work that's needed. The school side, again, we've run up against bureaucracy. The Department for Education now want to approve all solar schemes that go on the roofs of schools, and that process seems to be taking about 4 to 6 months to get it through the DFE. Local authorities have been very slow to sign roof lease agreements off. So we've had one that's been pending for over a year now, having initial approval but still not signed. So there are some bureaucracy delays which are a bit frustrating. When we've got the money, we're keen to spend it, the schools are keen to to start using the green electricity, but we really are delayed by these other things. And then we've got a third project which has again been funded by the Community Energy Fund, which is to look at new hydro technologies. So there's some new exciting technologies like vortex turbines. The technology we've used for the two existing plants is over 2,000 years old. It's an Archimedes screw, which was invented by Archimedes in, I think, 70 BC. So it's been around a while. It works very well, but it does need a head of water of about 4 to 5 metres, at least, to build a viable generator. Some of this new technology needs much less head of water, and potentially could be applied to a lot of rivers around the country. So we've got a project to look at how we could use that new technology. So there's plenty going on.
Thank you very much. Kate. So Kate Gilmartin's here from Rossendale Valley Energy at the moment, but feel free to introduce your other organisations you work for.
Right, thanks, Helen. Yeah, good to be here and to see new faces, as Philip said earlier. So yeah, my background in community energy is, well, yeah, started really when I was working over for CO2 Sense in Yorkshire, which is part of the regional development agencies. And I was doing a lot with community hydro groups and set up the Community Hydro Forum. And then I got involved in community energy and helped set up as a founding member of Community Energy England, also founding member of Greater Manchester Community Renewables, and now a volunteer director with Rossendale Valley Energy. So various different projects with various different experience, but I suppose the key is coming together and enabling projects to get off the ground. Considering what you were just saying then, David, you know, we've managed, Greater Manchester Community Renewables, we've managed to get solar on a school quite recently, one of my local secondary schools, 300 kilowatt scheme. It's actually an academy school, so we've not had to jump through quite so many hoops on that one. But we know that it's been much harder to raise finance. Now we don't have the feed-in tariff. So community energy's had to kind of restructure itself a lot more. And hence the work with Rossendale Valley Energy is a much more whole systems approach to community energy. And I think that's really interesting because it means that it is more available to lots of different people within a community. Whereas when historically we've looked at generation projects, they've been very site-specific, very technology-specific, and have needed a really very specific skill set as well to bring them forward. Whereas I think as we're moving to things like EV car clubs, I see Dan over there in the room, and also things like heat, it's much more applicable to a lot of different people, and it's much easier for people to get involved. So I think that's a bit of also my day job, I'm Chief Exec at the British Hydropower Association as well. So with that hat on, we're pushing for local energy solutions, whole system, community-based solutions, where possible, where there's generation potential for hydropower, that should be key. Local energy markets, as Phil mentioned earlier, big advocate of that as a key enabler, really telling government that actually there's a massive policy blind spot in terms of local energy. They're very focused on transmission upgrades and offshore wind, but actually heat and transport have to be electrified up the distribution network, so we have to have more focus on that. So we have issued a local energy pledge, which has been sent out to all our members to get them to write to their parliamentary candidates to really kind of push the point that we have to have local energy solutions if we are going to decarbonise. So yeah, various different fronts of community energy there, but hopefully that gives a bit of a synopsis.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Jonathan Atkinson from People Powered Retrofit and Carbon Co-op.
Hi there, and happy birthday to Community Energy England.
Thank you.
Big round of applause. Yeah, I was one of the founding members as well, and it's fantastic to see how the organisation has grown and gone through all these peaks and troughs of different governments and survived Liz Truss and here's today. So Carbon Co-op, we've been going since 2011. We help people and communities to make big reductions in their carbon emissions to tackle climate change. I think we're best thought of as an energy services cooperative, and we do things like flexibility services for householders in the context of DNO tenders. We do retrofit programs, particularly looking at kind of collective schemes and schemes in fuel poverty. And we also do a range of kind of energy planning with local authorities, and in particular looking at engagement with communities, giving them a voice in energy planning, and also addressing things like energy justice. Just to give you an idea of scale, we've got 20 members of staff, and like 400 members and a volunteer board as well. And then more latterly, in 2021, we set up a new cooperative, People Powered Retrofit, which is specifically an a one-stop shop for retrofit. So offering householders services to help them retrofit their homes, also get involved in training and replicating our services with others. And that organisation employs 40 members of staff. So it gives you a sense of the different kind of scale that we're involved with.
Smashing. And keep the microphone, Jonathan, I'll come to you first with this question. We'll go back down the line that way. So it gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. What do you think ambition means in the context of community energy projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing I want to say is that I think part of the power of community energy is its diversity of approaches, scales, and and different people that are involved. So we're talking about like scale and ambition, and obviously I come from a certain background, a certain organisation, but I don't think that every single community energy organisation should be like that. I think that part of the power is that for some it's like a voluntary endeavour, it's very local, it's based in a village or a part of a city, and that's totally fine. But there are others that may grow, respond to need, respond to the kind of opportunities that are there. So for me, ambition and scale have like two different things there. One of them is ambition of carbon saving in the context of climate change. We set up Carbon Co-op to try and do things that other people weren't doing to demonstrate what was possible. Our early projects were about delivering whole house retrofit and demonstrating that it was possible and that you could make really significant carbon savings and bill savings for the householders through retrofitting their homes, improving their homes, and just to try and demonstrate what you could do. And that's been the kind of guiding light of what we're doing. We try and not do what other people are doing, not because that we want to be different or anything, but because we're just trying to demonstrate what is possible ambition-wise. I think in terms of scale, it's a really challenging question, scale. The most common question or provocation I get from policymakers, local authorities, politicians are like, how are you going to scale? How are you going to get big? And they have these massive, massive carbon reduction targets. And they look at you and say, how are you going to tackle this? And it's frankly quite overwhelming. And I think it's also the kind of wrong question, in a sense of we are a movement of replicators, we are literally here to share our knowledge, share our experience, share what works with each other. And we achieve scale through replication, knowledge sharing, federating, collective action. So I do think there is opportunities for us as organisations to scale, to build, if that's right for us. But I also think part of that answer to scale comes from these effective collaborative models and joint action.
Thank you. Kate?
Thank you. And just to totally agree with everything you just said, Jonathan. I think what's fantastic about this sector is the massive amount of knowledge base that we have across the sector, and like Jonathan says, that willingness to share and collaborate. Generally, you don't get that with different companies. For example, the Community Hydro Forum that I mentioned, that's been going since 2012. And we have about 160 people on the list, and we meet twice a year virtually through a webinar, and I absolutely love those sessions because we've got people who've been operating their schemes for 12, 13 years. You've got people just setting out on that pathway. But there's not much knowledge that's not in that virtual room, and everyone's really happy to share their tips and give advice and offer site visits. And it's amazing, really, and you just think you wouldn't get that for free anywhere else. And it's just that absolute ambition to drive forward a key common goal of decarbonising as fast as we can, as well as we can in a social justice way. And I think that's our kind of community energy superpower. I think we have had this as Jonathan said, this roller coaster where business models have come and gone with the feed-in tariff. But I do think in some ways, on reflection, the business models that we created primarily through the feed-in tariff didn't really do what we wanted them to do anyway. So we were kind of forced down this route to put solar on buildings, and actually the people that were benefiting weren't really the people that we wanted to benefit. So we weren't really bringing anybody out of fuel poverty or addressing that kind of energy inequality. We were just trying to find a business model that worked, that would bring a community benefit fund, which is great, because then you can go and do other stuff, which is actually the other stuff that we wanted to do as well. So I think having the feed-in tariff gone, and a lot of soul searching and scratching around for quite a few years, has made us understand that we weren't quite aligned with what we want to achieve, which is decarbonisation in a whole systems way. But as Jonathan said, each community is going to be nuanced and each community will want to do something slightly different. I think fundamentally what we all need to try and get to, and this goes back to the point about feed-in tariff, is find a way where we aren't grant dependent and we're non-subsidy dependent as well. And that really kind of is tangential to our policy and lobbying arm. So, you know, what do we need to tell government that we need to find these business models to enable us to get to where we need to get to, which is non-grant dependency. And certainly what we're talking about with Net Zero Terrace Street, which is looking at a kind of a no upfront cost model that's homogenous and inclusive to everybody along the terrace street. And where we're going to be having a funding gap, which will hopefully disappear when we get economies of scale, or we can unlock things like the value of flexibility, which might be small at the moment, but in years to come will be greater. So we're saying to government, well, we need a social heat tariff, for example, or we need a gigawatt voucher, a bit like the rural gigabit voucher was when the rural broadband wasn't happening. So it's trying to look at how we get to a sustainable business model, and actually what policy gaps have we got to help us get us there. So we're all about action and delivering on the ground, and then showing government through the lens of projects where their market failures and where their policy failures are, and then trying to effectively lobby at the same time. So I do think our strength is in our numbers and our common goal and our real passion to share and collaborate to meet that common goal.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dave?
Yeah, I think there's tremendous potential around the country for community energy. I mean, if every small community had an energy project, it would be absolutely colossal. I think in terms of scaling up, we have to recognise there are some constraints. So, as Louise mentioned earlier, there's the distribution network is just not designed to receive energy at the distribution level. And getting D&O approval for any sort of big scheme is out of the question, I think, in a lot of cases. There's a new link road which was built 5 kilometres long, built outside Congleton. And it's got a south-facing embankment all the way down, and we had an idea of putting solar panels on that, and that we worked out we could get 5 megawatts of solar panels along there, which would supply more than enough power for Congleton. We approached the local DNO, and they just laughed. Seriously, there was no chance of us connecting that much power into the local network. So I think we've got to be realistic. Up to 50 kilowatts, it seems that you can generally get the scheme connected. Although we've had one of our school schemes, which is only about 35 kilowatts, and they've asked us to clip that, which means that effectively we're dissipating some of the power generated as heat, which totally defeats, obviously, the objective of green energy. So there's that constraint in terms of what you can connect to the network, which suggests that a lot of small schemes, sort of 50 kilowatt schemes, are probably the way to go at the moment. And then the other constraint is fundraising, which Kate mentioned. We've done 2 fundraising now. The first one we raised 700,000 for the hydro scheme through a community share offer, and that was relatively easy. We got £700,000 from all over the country, local community, but the investment came from across the UK. We've recently done the solar one, and we struggled a bit more because the environment is completely different now. The first time The first investment, banks and building societies were paying less than 1% interest. We were offering 4%. There was quite a lot of interest. This time we were offering 5%, but a lot of building societies were offering 5% as well. And so we struggled a lot more. So, you know, just how we're going to fund these schemes, I think, is a key question, and something we need to look at.
Thank you. So there was a range of different views there as to what ambition means, but I think some consensus around we're all driving for carbon savings and sharing the benefits of the energy transition with those in our communities. The next question is sort of more focused on how we might get there. So how crucial is it for community energy projects to establish strategic partnerships with organisations such as local government, businesses and other stakeholders to sort of broaden the reach, amplify your approach and to meet some of those ambitions? Do you want to, because you've got the mic, start this way?
Okay.
Start with you.
Yeah, I think relationships are very important across the board. You need lots of different relationships. We talked earlier about Community Energy Fund and the way that they've been funding a lot of the development work. That's been a critical relationship for us. Local authorities we've not done so good with, so that's got to be better. We found that they're slow to respond, quite difficult to work with, difficult getting planning authority in some cases, and generally that's not worked so well. I mentioned earlier in central government, the Department for Education. That's been quite a bureaucratic process. Anybody that's filled out this Form E that goes to the Department for Education will know what I'm talking about. But then there are other relationships that we need to form with people like contractors, installation contractors. We took a lot of time to select 2 installation partners for our solar scheme, because that relationship's got to last for 25 years effectively. They'll be maintaining the systems, we will be maintaining and subcontract that out. So they do the installation and then they do the ongoing maintenance. So there are relationships there. Then there's a relationship with your shareholders. So we've got community shareholders. We send them a regular update, biannually, a magazine to tell them what's going on. We have annual general meetings. They can get involved in the project if they want. So yeah, lots of different relationships to develop and nurture.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I mean, I suppose with Rossendale Valley Energy, we've got a really good working relationship with Rossendale Borough Council, who are one of the smallest local authorities in the country. And that's probably why we've worked so well with them, because they haven't got a really massive chain of decision-making hierarchy. So whereas trying to work with Lancashire County Council, you ask the question and you might not get a response for a very long time because it's got to go up and down, sideways, back up and down again, and then come back to you to say no. Whereas with Rossendale Borough Council, we were saying, well, look, we'll work to help you get funding, and the decision came back quite quickly, saying, yeah, that's a really good idea, thanks very much. So I think working with small local authorities means that can be more agile. I don't know what your experience of GMCA, Jonathan, are, but again, the larger the beast, then the harder it is for smaller local organisations to get a foothold. And often you're kind of treated with suspicion as well. Whereas with Rossendale Valley Energy, Rossendale Borough Council, we've got a really good working relationship. And I think the key there is, the whole point is that they don't have resource in-house, and they recognise that. Whereas the larger local authorities perhaps think that they have got resource in-house, so therefore they should be able to take this on themselves. So we've got this across the country now. Most local authorities have been stripped to the bone. You might have a climate emergency officer who's probably really junior, and they don't have much sway in terms of persuasion further up the hierarchy. So essentially you've got under-resource, you haven't got the expertise to even begin to think about climate emergency. Often I start by talking to local authorities by saying, what's your total carbon emissions? And they haven't got a clue. And And it's kind of like, well, if nobody knows that number, then you've not even begun to think about the enormity of this task. So I don't think local authorities are in any fit state to be able to take on the climate emergency. It's great that they have, lots of them have declared climate emergency, and that's a really important first step. But I think there's a long way to go in terms of how they then address that. And I think community energy groups are a really good way of helping to bridge that knowledge gap. Community Energy South have done some really great work on their local authority pathways programme, and I'd love to be able to replicate that kind of work in the Northwest. It really kind of helps bridge that gap and shows local authorities that community energy groups are a huge resource and have a massive knowledge base and a massive network that they can help tap into. So I think that's about visibility and just education, showing local authorities that community energy groups are a really useful tool for them to work with. I think in terms of going back to the previous question on scaling up, it's and hopefully, as Phil said about, if Labour come through with their local energy plans, there could be a huge injection into community energy. Obviously, we've had the Rural Community Energy Fund, which is something I worked on when I was at the North West Hub, and also the Community Energy Fund now. And I think what I've seen from that is it's all about, yes, giving grant funding out, but you've got to have the support that goes alongside that. You've got to have people with the right knowledge base to actually help support groups. And whether that's with bringing in Community Energy England and their mentorship that they've done previously, or that peer-to-peer, or things like the Community Hydro Forum. But it's no good, you don't get very far by giving a group some money if they don't have that expertise to move things forward. So it's about trying to share that expertise, because not all communities will have that level of expertise required to bring forward a complex project like Havana Weir, for example. So I think it's about making sure the grant funding's there, but then ensuring that the enablers to create those projects and share that learning is also there. And that goes back to the hubs as well. The hubs are there to help share that information, but again, they could probably do with more people, more expert resource as well. So I think having those strategic relationships is absolutely key for community energy, and we need to look as a sector at where that's working really well. So Community Energy South, brilliant. What Plymouth Council did with Plymouth Energy Community, or PEC, what Oxford did with Oxford Low Carbon Hub. They were arm's length organisations set up over a decade ago by the local authority with their support, and they've been really successful in bringing forward projects. So it's trying to show other local authorities really good practice, like PEC, Low Carbon Oxford Hub, and Community Energy South, and trying to encourage them to not reinvent the wheel, but just use similar processes to get to where we all need to get to.
Okay, thank you very much. Jonathan?
Yeah, local authorities, just the general state from all levels of local and national government is just so degraded, and I really feel for people who work in that context. It's super challenging. The scale of the need versus the capacity and the skills available is just this total mismatch. I think it is challenging to work with local authorities. There are opportunities. I think we can offer skills and knowledge and insight that they lack, and we can help them to fill gaps and realise new opportunities. But likewise, sometimes there will be a lack of realism from local authorities and combined authorities in sense of what is possible, often because of that lack of knowledge or expertise. And unfortunately, a lot of them become kind of prey to large consultancies taking lots of money off them to sell them kind of quite unreasonable, unrealistic kind of net zero kind of projects. So it is super challenging. In terms of the partnerships we build, we look to build long-term relationships with organisations. I don't know if that's me. You're getting that feedback? Yeah. We look to build kind of long-term collaborative relationships with organisations where it's based on shared values, really. I think that's one of the biggest bits of learning from us is if you have a mismatch in the underlying values. We work really well with cooperatives and other kind of social enterprise other community energy groups as well. But if there's a mismatch in what you're trying to achieve, then it's not necessarily a recipe for good results. We work a lot nationally and internationally, and I think maybe it's part of the type of organisation that we are, that we work with similar organisations on the continent in Europe that have kind of like a different level of ambition, a different like approach to energy services. So, and we do a lot of European collaborative projects around things like energy systems and flexibility and all this sort of thing. And there's definitely, I think there is so much learning to be drawn from other European contexts, so much experience, so much commonality as well, and I really advocate kind of engagement in that kind of context. I'm also planning to go to America next year, which will be, again, looking at super interesting kind of similar groups there, doing things that are similar to us. And yeah, collaborations with professionals, I think what we've tried to do throughout our organisational kind of history is build the expertise within our cooperative. Quite often I've seen relationships where like the value is taken by professionals and consultants who will work with a community organisation and kind of take that value away. And the community energy organisation is then like a flag waver for them. And our ethos is one of kind of, again, kind of collaboration and shared kind of values, and we want to, and have done, develop our professional expertise so that we're then able to offer that and we're then able to generate value, and that's kind of been part of our story, I think, and that's kind of where we're going as an organisation. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Before I move on to my next question, does anyone in the audience have a question or a comment they'd like to make at this point? No? Okay, no problem at all. So, now thinking about the success that we're all going to achieve with our projects and meet our ambition, how do we measure that success? We've talked about the fact that carbon saving is one key measure, because that's the reason why we're here and the big motivation. But beyond the things that deliver that, so kilowatts produced or kilowatt hours saved, what other measures of success do you think we can point to say that we've achieved what we're trying to achieve? Jonathan?
Yeah, we've got quite an interesting approach to governance, which is based around an approach called policy governance or Carver governance, which has been created and popularised in America. And it's to kind of cut the kind of jargon, it's kind of a way to measure our performance against impact. So the board and our membership set some ends, some objectives that they want the organisation to achieve, and then as a staff team we kind of report against that. And those, like, as you say, Helen, like carbon reduction is like climate change and tackling it is our primary end, our aim. But we have like 7 nested within that, and they refer to things around retrofit and energy systems, but also I think important kind of thematic impact things that we're trying to achieve, like tackling energy justice, like creating collective action against climate change rather than individualised action. And also importantly, in the discussion around scale, like codifying and sharing the models that we're developing and the knowledge that we're developing and sharing that with others. I think it's for every organisation to think about and reflect on the impact they want to see in their community and what that looks like where you're based or where people are based. But that process that we went through of creating those ends was very collaborative, very reflexive, with a lot of dialogue and discussion with our members, with the broader community as well. And I think I'm really comfortable with those ends because carbon is part of it. And like, there was an interesting discussion on Twitter this week about like, should community energy just focus on carbon tunnel vision and nothing else? And I think whilst carbon is so important, and you know, as he was talking about, Kate, you know, carbon emissions, that's ultimately like the judgment of success. We really need to bring these other things with us, like, and especially as our organisation feels that those things are important around like a just transition, energy justice, and a kind of a collective effort on climate change.
Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, thank you. It just makes me think about a conversation I had with someone from Whitby Esk Energy, which is a hydro scheme, and I saw them a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about what success looks like. And they delivered a project about 12 years ago, and it's operating really well. And as you know, David, getting a hydro project off the ground is massively difficult. I won't talk about the Environment Agency here, but it's very, very difficult. So he was saying he was quite disappointed because they achieved their ambition of delivering a hydro scheme, but he said he thought it was going to have a much wider ripple effect. They use it for education, they bring schools there, etc. But in terms of carbon, it's not a huge carbon saver, although it is winter generation and will knock out peaking plants, just put that in there. But I think what I was saying to him was, actually we are a movement, and our success is the fact that we're still here after 10 years and more, and we're growing, and actually our influence is growing as well. And yes, absolutely, we're all focused on carbon, but we're focused on doing that in a way that incorporates social justice, energy equality, not leaving people behind. But I think we're expanding more and more, and we're able to influence policy more and more. As Phil was saying earlier, been working really hard with the Co-op Party and really influential in getting the Labour local energy plan forward. That's huge, that's really, really massive. And that's achieved off the back of a decade of lots of people working really hard at ground level and continuing to network in the way that we do. And I also think in terms of innovation, we're really pushing boundaries. Rossendale Valley Energy, we're working with Electricity North West on a Strategic Innovation Fund project, as is Community Energy South, as is Low Carbon Oxford Hub, as is Carbon Co-op. So lots of community groups working in the innovation space at kind of real cutting edge, talking about smart low energy systems and keeping it real in terms of making sure that energy quality is embedded in what a smart low energy system is going to look like. And talking to people like Oxford Low Carbon Hub and Community Energy South and sharing what we're doing. And again, it goes back to my point earlier. You wouldn't get that in consultancy. You wouldn't have people having a conversation about, okay, we're doing this application, what are you putting in yours? And we'll make sure that we're dovetailed and we're not replicating, and we're bringing strength by referencing each other in our applications. So I think that's really powerful because we want to protect IP, but for social franchise or for common good rather than for our business profit. So I think that is a measure of success, how far we've come and how far we've I don't want to say infiltrated, but how far we have infiltrated into various different policy, innovation, and how we're getting heard in that net zero transition as well. So yes, it is all about carbon, but it's much broader than that. And in terms of how we measure that, well, I think what we're doing here today is a measure of the success that we're having so far, and we'll continue to measure that success by seeing what's happening on the ground and how we're pushing the boundaries.
Thank you. So how does your organisation consider success?
Well, again, I think the key thing is carbon. And you have to say that individual projects, it's maybe not a massive amount, but if you look at all the community schemes across the country, then it is a massive amount. So the more we can do, the more carbon we can save, and that's a major saving. But for us as well, other key aspects of what we do are education very much. So we do run visits around the hydro scheme for local schools, educational group, U3A, various U3A groups have been around, even the Institute of Engineering and Technology. We've got a tour for them organised in the next couple of weeks. So there's been a lot of interest. We plan to do a lot more with the schools on education with the solar scheme, because they're all going to have a green energy scheme on their roof. And we're hoping to inspire the next generation of environmental scientists and engineers. So the plan is to give them a data feed on what's being generated and a monitor, so they can monitor what's being done and give them all the data and statistics that they need. We've got some ideas about competitions as well, how they can improve the utilisation, and we're going to run a bit of a competition between the schools to see who can get the best utilisation of the solar energy that's generated. Then the other aspects, we're not for profit, so any surplus that we do generate goes to local charities. And I mentioned we've contributed £15,000 to local charities so far, and there should be a lot more to come over the years. So I think that's an important aspect of what we do. And one of the other things that probably isn't talked about much, but our volunteer team and the benefits that they get, they put a lot of hard work in, but we also get a lot of reward from this as well. I would say probably 90% of our team, we've got just over 30 people, 90% of us are retired, and we get a lot of physical activity and mental activity and the benefits of working together as a team for a common goal, which is a good thing, I think.
Yes, thank you very much. Right, last chance to the audience. Anybody got any questions before I ask my last question and I'll sum up before lunch?
Or like different perspectives.
Yes, or little comments. Yes, Emma.
There's a comment really to
Please.
say about the locality and the working with councils and the importance of persistency when it comes to councils. I'm on the board of Community Energy England, and we run a loan organisation that provides loans on behalf of councils. And every time I talk to a council, I recommend that they work incredibly closely with their local community energy group. And I push Community Energy England because you are, and you guys are the independent voice of this sector at the moment. You have all of those skills. You're not part of the system. You're not charging for consultancy. You're not charging for this. You're actually doing it for all that is good in the world. And they really need to work more closely with you. So every opportunity I come across the council, I talk about how brilliant you guys are and how important it is to work with you. So as Kate was saying earlier, the smaller the council, the easier they are to work with. So go for a borough council if you've struggled. I've tried to work with GOCA, and they've been saying that they'll work with me for the past 4 years. I'm even on their website, I still don't have any money of theirs to lend. But I work with small councils like Tonbridge or Tingbridge that are humans who you can talk to and you can work with. So please don't give up working with your councils, they're so critical.
Yeah, I think that's true. Our local borough council have been quite supportive. The unfortunate thing is the local borough council don't have the authority to grant things like roof leases or to lease land to us. That goes to the county council. And our experience, whether it's a bad one, I mean, obviously Kate's had a much better one with her local authority, but we've had a very poor experience.
Yes, comment to the back.
You know when you said about putting the solar panels up in Congleton and you said you were laughed at, I just wondered, is that because the system isn't ready to handle that amount of energy? Because I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a problem with the way that the electricity network, as it was originally designed, was to have a super grid with nuclear power stations and coal-fired power stations hanging off it, and then everything got distributed down to factories and houses at the bottom. Now what we're doing is sort of turning energy upside down, so we've got things like solar schemes that are putting power in at the bottom of the network, and the network wasn't really designed for it. And as Louise said earlier, that the electricity companies and the grid are putting a lot of money into redeveloping the network, but it's an expensive and it's going to take a long time. So it means that when you want to connect a solar scheme to the network, or any community hydro scheme to the network, you have to apply to your local DNO, the distribution network operator. And they look at the network and say, can that local network receive this amount of power? And don't forget, your system might not be the only one. So there might be several other people wanting to input onto that local network. So they have a look at the strength of the network and to see whether it can receive that amount of power. And if it can't, then they can deny you connection, or they can ask you to clip the amount of power that you put back in.
Can I just clarify that? If you're applying for a grid connection, you don't necessarily get told no, but if it requires reinforcement of the network, there'll be a cost associated with that, and there's rules as to how that cost is apportioned. and a lot of that cost can be apportioned to the customer depending on what type of customer you are. And there can also be a timescale applied to the reinforcement that's required to accommodate your scheme. And there's a lot of issues in the network at the moment with constraints at the transmission network that are affecting schemes that want to connect to a distribution network. So quite often the constraints are with the transmission network, and they take an awfully long time to fix. There's a massive amount of policy work going on in industry at the moment to bring down those timescales, to review the schemes that have already got grid connections to see which ones are actually going to connect, to try and free up some capacity to connect to the network. But distribution network operators have a responsibility to ensure that all customers can have quality and reliability of supply, so they have to assess anything that wants to connect to the network to see how it would impact voltage and thermal capacity, and make a connection offer in response to that. So you can always connect to a network. The issue is how much it will cost, how much you have to pay, and when that connection will actually be made available.
That is true. But in the case of these community energy schemes, quite often the amount of money you have to pay to connect it makes the scheme uneconomic.
Yes, that's what people mean when they say no. And the other thing I'd like to make, in the same way that all local authorities are individuals, so go and talk to your local authority to find out how easy they are to work with. Every single point of connection on the network is individual as well, so what is possible in one area might not be possible in another area. They all have their individual characteristics, which doesn't help with applying sort of generalities of schemes. I saw another hand.
It was just a comment really. I mean, we've known for a long time that the grid needs to change so that, you know, it's a distributed grid. So, you know, why have they not got on and sorted that out? You know, this is like, you know, it's clear that this is going to happen if you want, when you're switching from large power stations to renewable generation, which by its nature is distributed.
Yes.
Then, you know, why is it not being sorted out?
Well, it is being sorted out at the timescale that the majority of low carbon technologies are being rolled out. But just to sidestep this discussion, can Louise pick this up in any of your sessions this afternoon? So I think it warrants a further discussion at the time that we've got there.
Yeah, no, but I think it's just worth pointing out as well, and that is we can never invest ahead of needs as well. So regardless, as I said, we're the DNO for this area, so regardless if you live in this area, regardless if you pay your bill to X amount will come to us as the DNO, and then we can't just sit and think of like ahead that somebody's going to need that supply, we'll get things written, we can't, we've got to react.
There is this, I mean, I see it's a failure of policy on the national level in that we should have been investing ahead of so that it's ready for when the renewables are, want to be installed, rather than this sort of, now we've got this sort of big delay.
Just to put the other point of view across, from Ofgem, the energy regulator's point of view, until very recently, their primary concern has been protecting the cost of energy for consumers, and the more investment that you do ahead of the need, the more unnecessary costs it puts onto consumers who may already be in fuel poverty. So they've got this balancing act of investing in infrastructure so it's ready and customers can connect their low carbon technology versus protecting the cost for consumers. They've not necessarily got it correct, but that is the sort of policy balancing.
I mean, it's worth saying, Labour are already talking about this.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer's talking about, well, they've set this very challenging decarbonisation target, and then I heard him talking on the radio, if we build a wind farm, how long is it going to take to connect it? And he does the maths and we're not going to make our target. So it is a massive political issue.
It is a massive issue. And I don't think it's one we can get. I mean, I'm happy to discuss it for hours, but I was asked to finish this session on time, which is in a minute. So
There is a breakout session this afternoon
Yes.
about the technologies and things that we
yeah, so I think, if you want to follow this up more, then we can talk about it this afternoon, because it does relate to both connections process and what's involved with that, but also, as Louise said, everything that the DNOs are trying to do to manage the grid and to get as many people connected in a timescale that's appropriate for their projects. But we have talked this morning about sort of ambitions for community energy, and obviously we're all doing it for carbon emissions reductions, but there's more than one way to get there, and I think I picked out a couple of phrases from the first round of questions, which was power in diversity, so diversity of approach, and also diversity of people and communities involved, I'd like to add there. And also, Kate said our superpower is being social justice, so obviously we're not just about delivering carbon emissions at any cost, it's about making sure that we get all the other benefits that can come from low carbon energy projects, so helping with fuel poverty, helping improve people's lives, helping bring those local economic benefits, and everything else that it is good about community energy. We've also talked a bit about the strategic relationships and the challenges of working with local authorities, but also some of the positives involved. And I think Jonathan made the key point around making sure that when you're forming partnerships, you need shared values, because then you'll always be able to fall back on the fact that you're trying to achieve the same thing. You may occasionally disagree or have diversity in opinion about how to get there, but as long as you're trying to achieve the same thing, then you can form a partnership for the longer term. And they may not just be with your local supply chain or your local partners, but to look abroad as well and look for examples there. And now we've talked about the measures of success as well. So because we're not just about achieving carbon emissions, how else can we measure that success? And I do think it is in those wider added benefits that we can bring, some of which are more easy to measure, and some of which come back to Dave's points around the rewards for volunteers and the social capital and the social benefits that people get from being involved in these projects. And like I said, the barriers that are there are things like connecting to the grid, are fascinating industry barriers that I could talk about for a long time, but you'll be pleased to know that it is now lunchtime. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found that discussion useful, and happy to take any more feedback over lunch. So thank you very much. Thanks for the panel members.